Sign up to Council's disaster and weather event warning system. Receive alerts about emergency news, severe weather events and other public safety alerts via SMS or email. Registering to the disaster messaging system is free. To register, visit Gladstone Regional Council's Region Watch website and click on the Register for Warnings button. Get ready, Gladstone. Take the steps to protect what's most important to you. Let's be better prepared and protected for emergencies and disasters.
Well, good morning. The time being 9 a.m, I declare open the general meeting for the Gladstone Regional Council for the 20th of September 2022. We have an apology from Councillor Trevor, which has previously been resolved. So, councillors, I'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is messages of condolence. And I have a message of condolence, obviously, for the royal family on the passing of Queen Elizabeth II earlier in September. Our late Queen's funeral was held last night after a number of days. She passed away in Balmoral and was transferred to London, and her funeral was held last night, where she was laid to rest at Windsor Castle with her late husband Prince Philip, her parents and her sister Margaret. The council chambers flags are flying at half-mast, and our chambers are also illuminated purple and will be for the next 7 days. Councillors, there is also a condolence book available for residents in the Gladstone region wanting to send their messages of condolence or messages of support to the royal family following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. The condolence book is located here at the Civic Centre in Gundoon Street, and also at the libraries across the region: the Gladstone City Library, the Agnes Water Library, the Boyne Island Library, the Calliope Library, Miriam Vale Library and the Mount Larkham Library, and they will be available for residents to send their messages for up to 7 days. The Prime Minister of Australia has announced that there will be a national day of mourning on the 22nd, which will of course be a public holiday. I'd now request Council to take a minute's silence and respect of our late passing of our Queen. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Thank you. In the gallery, thank you, officers. Our condolence books will be, of course, sent to the royal family, and we send our condolences to King Charles, Prince Edward, the Princess Royal, and Prince Andrew and the families. Thank you, councillors. Is there any further messages of condolence? No further messages of condolence. I'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is prior notifications of conflict of interest. Tanya. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Mayor's statement on current issues. And I'd like to give a shout out to the team at Creative Gladstone for a fantastic event in the Carnival of Arts held last week. A week-long event which lots of locals got involved in, of course, culminating in their exhibition launch on the weekend. They've done a fantastic job over a couple of years now, creating that event for our local region there in Pitt Street. And I just want to say well done to the volunteers and everyone involved in that event. Of course, Under the Trees was on the weekend as well, and obviously everyone had a fantastic time in Boyne Island there as well, and congratulations again to the volunteers who put that amazing event on for our local community. And all good, thank you. I'd like to also mention that Drine and Drive work has finally started on Drine and Drive. Councillors and officers had an inspection there last week. The $5 million project, the first stage involves a relocation of water mains, and then construction will commence with the intersection upgrade. Now, traffic flow will be managed by temporary traffic lights, of course, keeping that intersection and access to shops open at all times. And I'd like to thank both the Queensland Government and the Federal Government for jointly funding this upgrade. And it's great to see the refurbishment of the Sister Kenny E Memorial Pool has complete as well. Now, access isn't available to residents just yet. The pool is being slowly reheated and refilled back to temperature and is expected to open in a couple of weeks. Obviously, it's being raised at 1 degree per day. So these upgrades at the Aquatic Centre include new amenities, have also been funded by Council, Queensland Government and the Australian Government, and being built construction-wise by local company Youngs. Events coming up in the next couple of weeks, of course, we have the Baffle Creek Family Fishing Festival already underway in Baffle Creek. It goes right through to the Family Fun Day on the 24th. The Calliope Rodeo this weekend is on the 23rd and 24th, a huge event in Calliope. And then the following weekend on the 1st and 2nd of October is the 70 and 70 Cultural Connections Immersions Festival. A number of events across our region, councillors, and I hope you can all get out and about and enjoy them. The next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes. The confirmation of the minutes for the general meeting for the 6th of September 2022. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor O'Grady. All in favour? Motion's carried. Thank you. We'll move to the next item, which is our officers' reports. And the first officers' report is G3.1, Reconciliation Action Plan Reference Group, new members and membership. And I'll hand over to the General Manager of Community Development and Events, Kylie Lee. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. This morning we are recommending to appoint 4 officers to our Reconciliation Action Plan Reference Group. This group is an amazing group of local community members who have been instrumental in advising council of our First Nation, actions, and also in developing the Reconciliation Action Plan. We currently have 6 community members appointed to our RAP reference group. The terms of reference allows us to have 7. We've had 1 resignation from the committee, and that was based on work commitments. An expression of interest was conducted, and a panel assessed 9 applications from the community, which is a fantastic effort. The panel consisted of our Manager of Governance, our Manager of Culture and Capability, and our First Nations Liaison Officer, Gay Sirius, who's here with me today. The 4 members that we are wishing to appoint are Chantel Johnson from the Gurang Gurang, Duran Johnson, also from Gurang Gurang, Paul Olsen, a Waka Waka man who's lived in Gladstone his entire life, and Sky Alberts, a Gungaloo, Woolly Woolly and Gurang Gurang person, and she's also been in Gladstone for 5 years. These appointed members will join our existing members who are Annette Rutherford, who's also the co-chair. She's a Gungaloo Gurang Gurang woman. Annie Johnson from Gurang Gurang. Auntie Cecilia Egmerleys, a Baili elder. Megan Nixon from Gangaloo and Gurang Gurang. Patricia Coleman from Baili, and Gay Sirius from Gurang. Tia Horan is also on our committee. At this point in time, we are not aware of the family that that Tia belongs to at the moment, but we will find that out in due course. The 4 people scored highly in the interview process, which was aligned with council's recruitment processes. I invite any questions from our councillors.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Hanson?
It's pretty straightforward, and I'm happy to recommend and move that we recommend item 1 and 2.
Yep.
We adopt the officers' recommendations.
Thank you. Move Councillor Hanson. Seconded, please. Seconded, Councillor Goodluck. Any discussion, councillors? Comments? Yep.
I do co-chair the Reconciliation Action Plan Advisory Group. It's an
Reference group?
Yeah, reference
Yep.
group. And I think it's great to have received so many expressions of interest. So it is definitely a positive that we are able to extend the membership to 10 people. So that obviously allows for when people are not available or, things happen. This is a voluntary position. So we all have lives. So it's great to be able to have more people that can fill in when others are not available. So thank you for doing that.
Councillor Grady.
Thanks. Can I just add to that? Also, it's great to see other traditional owners from elsewhere come in as well, so which we've got a great gamut now of traditional owners, which is be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Have a mover in Councillor Hanson, second and Councillor Goodluck. All in favour? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Kylie. Thanks, Gay. The next item is G3.2, Boyne Island Tenement Sands Shoreline Erosion Management Plan. I'll hand over to the General Manager of Strategic Asset Performance, Mark Francis. Thank you, Mark.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, councillors. We're asking you today to repeal the Boyne Island Tenement Sands Shoreline Erosion Management Plan, or SEMP, from 2014, in favour of the new SEMP for 2022, noting that in terms of the strategic direction and the policy position, you did endorse our coastal hazard, was it Chaz? Adaptation plan, which had the SEMPs as an action and a deliverable of those. So the repeal of the SEMP from 2014 in favour of the new one noting the 2022. I've got Ali Moore here, who's our Manager of Environment and Conservation, who will be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Ali. Questions, councillors? Councillor Churchill, happy to move. Seconder, please.
Yeah, very happy to move.
Yeah. Seconder?
I can second it. I just got a couple of other things I'd like to just chat about the report, that's all.
Okay, well, I'll throw it to Councillor Muscat and then I'll come back to you. Councillor Muscat.
Mine are not really questions, but I'm like very impressed with the management plan. So also I've read, I guess, what we had before, and I know things have changed, and you know we know a lot more than what we used to, but this is just great. This great stuff. I mean, the clear implementation plan, the clear actions that we are asked to take, and the options and how the options were analysed and assessed. And yeah, thank you, congratulations, and to the consultants and to your team, Ali. So it's great. Now, obviously, there's going to be budgetary allocations that we have to put towards this. So I look forward to seeing them, because this is actually, anyone that lives in the Boyne Island, Tannum Sands area should be reading this and understanding the work that council is doing, because it might not be super exciting, but it is very important. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muscat. Councillor Branthwaite.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm busy searching through all the pages that I scribbled on yesterday. But my questions were around the access and the accessibility of the Lily's Beach, because there's been a lot of discussion on social media, I suppose, the last few weeks about the degradation of the vegetation, and it's reflected in here as well. Obviously, there's a certain element of our community that we all love to go up the beach, but there's a certain amount of community that want to play up the beach and play in the sand dunes. And so my theory is go to Land Cruiser Park, go down and play down there. Don't play in our sand dunes, but go and enjoy the sand dunes. But there's also a notation in here about the relocation of the access to Lily's Beach. Now it goes, I see the proposed track goes right behind the residence, comes very close to the residence actually. Is there a reason, well, obviously a reason for it, but why so close to the residence?
So Alluvium, when they were looking at the various different options, identified that that could be a potential access area based on access that's been there before. So sometimes there's been illegal access and paths created. But at this point in time, our preference was not to move to a new location, because that would include, you know, disturbing already existing vegetation and creating new erosion issues. So our preference was actually to move and leave it where it was, and just implement management options rather than creating new access. Additionally, we've got issues with dog off-leash areas, as well as people using those bathing areas as well. So
Yeah.
The preference is to remain in situ.
The other thing was with there's remarks in this report about illegal camping, not just at the camping site at the other end, but it's also obviously camping halfway along or whatever. Is there any thoughts about periodic closures of the beach itself?
We haven't considered it as yet at this point in time. Any changes to that would need to be considered under our local law, because it would be closure or a temporary closure to the area. So it would be much like your dog off-leash areas, where we have it within the local law that it is closed for these reasons during these months of the year or during these times. So that would have to come at a later date. At this point in time, we thought the management option, implementing traffic control or signage, and having a look at what options we can do, and then we can monitor and revisit what comes next if we need to. Okay,
it's one of three questions, sorry. The other questions was relating to the Island Esplanade. Obviously, when we had our floods back in 2013 and Lake Orwonga overflowed by, 8.7 metres, we had a huge amount of water that flowed through there and washed away a fair bit of the bank. A lot of it was due to boats being tied up to trees and, back eddies forming behind them and washing away the bank. You can plainly see that. But what we've got left with now is people trying to not just reclaim their land, but probably protect their land. And there's 3 scenarios in here of what possible way we can actually do to protect that shoreline. Has there been any progress on that at all, or is it?
So next steps for that one is that once we are happy and we've approved the new 2022 version, or 2022 version, we will then commence our investment decision framework process and put that particular management option through that IDF process. So we need to obviously ensure that if we do any work, it needs to be the right work at the right time, and make sure that we understand what the operational commitment is if we were to build a wall, or what that investment might be with that community. So that will involve some stakeholder communication as well, or engagement.
Is that the same with the likes of the Oaks Road, with the housing, the area in front of the Oaks Road?
Similar. The Oaks Road, those properties have, I guess, the luxury of not having encroachment into their land as yet, whereas Island Esplanade are already, part of their land is actually on the beachfront already. So similar situation, but very different in that Island Esplanade, their properties are or have already been impacted.
Indeed,
the Oaks Road, those properties actually have the option potentially to build their own revetment or their own protection measures within their own properties.
Yeah. My last question, I suppose, or inquiry, is based around the Wildcattle Creek aspect of things. There's obviously been community suggestions that another alternate entry to Wildcattle Creek has been suggested, and it's been modelled, I suppose, in here as well. And my first thoughts was, okay, well, what's going to happen with the people that actually at Bangalee? You know, how are they going to get across there? Because all of a sudden that will become a deep channel through there, and they won't be able to get across there. But that's addressed later on as well in the report. I've lost my train of thought now, because I was reverting back to the stormwater drain. That's been the main issue, along with that erosion along there. So there's quite a detailed diagram in there of how council is managing that erosion with the stormwater drain.
Yeah, so there is a management option to look at, because at the moment the stormwater drain just, I guess you've got all the velocity of the water coming through, and that's what's causing the erosion. So we can look at different management options around slowing that flow down, and maybe having a nature basin that kind of slows the flow and disperses it a bit better. So that will hopefully address the erosion in closer to Millennium Esplanade. And then the wild cattle boat ramp is a separate issue, and that's one that we will need to engage with Department of Transport and Main Roads.
Yeah, I was surprised that that's a Department of Main Roads boat ramp. I was quite surprised with that. The aerial shot, though, does show that washout behind it all. But
that's right.
In some cases, that's quite handy for us launching boats. But the whole area dries anyway at low tide, so no one goes, I've been caught myself. But yeah, all right. Thank you very much. It was a really good report too, by the way. Really good report.
Thanks, Councillor Branthwaite. Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I endorse Councillor Branthwaite's comments here. Exceptional report. It's probably a question. I wasn't going to ask a question, but as the mover of the motion, Councillor Branthwaite did raise a particular pertinent point that I raised last week when we were talking about controlled releases from Lake Awunga with Gladstone Area Water Board and the new evacuation centre that's been built up there. So my question is more pertinent to this statement of management intent now, 2022 going forward. What's its relationship with Gladstone Area Water Board as one of the key stakeholders, I suppose, for the aspects of the water flow downstream in the Boyne?
So when we did the engagement, they were invited to participate, but as I guess in terms of that, anything to do with Island Esplanade or Turtle Way, when we go through our investment decision framework, we will identify them as another key stakeholder again and make sure that we include those discussions with them, because yeah, you're right, we need to make sure that if we do any management option, that there's not going to be further impacts or it's not going to be exacerbated later on.
Yeah, and I think the other pertinent point at this stage is the forecasters, and if they're right as such, that we're going to get, unprecedented rain coming over this next season. So I think it couldn't be more appropriate that perhaps Gorb themselves take some sense of contribution or ownership in relation to the management intent of that particular area for where they're responsible as well.
Yep. I think there's also, council have received funding to do some additional flood modelling along the Boyne Island, which will look at some of that synergies between sea level rise or our Coast Our Future data, as well as flood modelling at the same time. So that will also help inform some of that work.
That's terrific. Thank you for that. Well done.
Councillor Goodluck.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mark and Ali. And I, you know, there's a lot of great work in the whole report, but just on the issue of the Lilies Beach access, I think it's recommended options is option 1 and 3, which is maintain status quo and then restrict access. We've gone for option 1, which is maintain the status quo, with a relatively small budget allocation. So I'm just questioning, you know, how much are we actually going to be able to manage the impacts that are identified in you know, the four-wheel driving and the potentially illegal camping, etc., with such a small budget allocation? And is it, I want some context around why option 3 isn't a more considered approach.
So option 1, I guess, enables us to install the traffic management signage and whatnot, which enables the police to actually do some enforcement down there. So at the moment, without that, the signage around speed limits and permit conditions, they're not able to actually do some of that enforcement, and so that hopefully will address some of those concerns. And if not, as I said, we can monitor it and bring something back later on. I guess in terms of restricting access, through the community engagement, it has been identified that people still value the ability to drive along that area and access that area. So we were very mindful of trying to strike that balance for right now. And we would need to really consider what those restrictions look like and maybe learn from some other councils that are already doing that, and work out what behaviour we're trying to address and how we actually can achieve that. So some areas might close it down at night time, but obviously it's tidal based, so you need to make sure that you've actually factoring the tide times in, and what do you do in summer versus winter when the night times might be different and stuff like that. So it needs a bit more investigation before we consider what restrictions actually look like.
So with the and I take that, you know, there are people appreciate Lilies Beach for what it is. Unfortunately, there's a minority of people that do the wrong thing. What sort of time frame would we be looking at to get, you know, this signage and stuff in place? I don't see any dedicated budget line item for signage and things, but I appreciate that if we can get that into place, we can have assistance from, you know, the police to actually enforce the law. But I guess we've known about this problem for a long time. This is probably an opportunity to really try and tackle that problem, I feel like, because people are passionate also about protecting that area. It's an issue that gets raised with me all the time, and I'm sure with everyone else. The other thing I think I saw there around the permits, is there something that we can look at with the permits process? Because I know that we set out in the terms and conditions of when you apply for a permit to drive on Lilies Beach, I would be surprised if anyone that actually applies and pays for a permit actually has any understanding of what's in it. Maybe there's some way that we can change that permit in a way that forces people to actually understand and go through and read. Perhaps instead of just an online thing, perhaps you might have to come in and to one of the council offices or something and actually sit down with an officer and do an application in that way. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out there, but I reckon 9 out of 10 people with four-wheel drives that go down there and drive on the dunes, they wouldn't have a clue what was in that permit when they clicked the sign thing. It's like $5, I think, or $50 for a year. So there's not really an incentive for people to actually acknowledge what they're supposed to be doing. It's just a click button, get your permit, go for a good time down on the dunes. So if there's something that we can look at in that respect, I think that's an opportunity to try and, with that education part, and perhaps we can look at, I'm not sure what's I'd like to have an understanding, I guess, for another day perhaps, of what work we can do and whether or not we need to apply a bigger piece of budget to that, because I'm not sure what we'll be able to do with that that's there. I'm sure it'll be, I think we need more.
The signage and the traffic signage is work that's already underway as we speak, and a significant amount of that work had already been started before we started this process. So that is currently underway, and we are just awaiting updates around where it's up to. In terms of the permits, it's something I guess we can look at. There was an education piece done at the Boyintanum hookup. We collaborated with a number of other organisations and spent some time down at the entrance and had a chat to any vehicles that were willing to stop, and spoke about some of the seagrass and the turtle nesting and stuff like that as well. So there was a number of vehicles stopped on that day and they were all willing to participate. So that's something that we can look at continuing as well, as having a look at the permits. The permits used to be done in person, and it created efficiencies by enabling them to be done online. But I guess that's a conversation that we can take offline.
Just finally, sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I know police do patrols down in the area from time to time. I've seen them there myself. If they do see someone, driving in the dunes in breach of their permit conditions, do we sort of have that collaboration with the local police station to have an understanding and then perhaps cancel those permits? And I think we've got cameras at the entrance so that those people, if they're found to be doing the wrong things, they can no longer get access to Lily's Beach. That's sort of another, certainly an incentive to do the right thing, or you won't be allowed back there.
Well, certainly we can restrict the issue of another permit, but there's no physical barrier to somebody going there, and we do know from the camera evidence that we don't have full compliance with permits. People go onto the beach without permits. I think the last count we had was around about 60% go without permits. So there's a significant compliance issue to be undertaken there. And if I think what
do we pursue that non-compliance?
We do when we're running the camera observations and the investigations there. We do that. They're just temporary cameras, not permanent cameras. So we run campaigns to do that, and we usually do some socials around the point that we're going to be undertaking that compliance activity, but we can't do that all the time. So that happens maybe once or twice a year, where we try and ensure compliance through education and some enforcement action as well. But it is to have a full compliance framework in place would be quite expensive in terms of making sure that people are doing the right thing. So it is that balance that you've all talked about and Ali's talked about between education and some enforcement and compliance as well. But it could be that as we go through the investment decision framework for any other actions for Lily's, that it may become uneconomic to continue to allow it, and because it's about the risk appetite again. So do we allow it at the low level of compliance that we're able to provide at the moment and trust people to do the right thing, or do we look to be much more restrictive in terms of what's able to access?
I think if 60% of people that go down there when we have those campaigns don't even have a permit, so more than half the people that are on that beach haven't even read the permit terms and conditions. That's how little they care. Perhaps it's already not economic to continue to allow this. So I look forward to having a discussion around the IDF, but I guess this is a call, I suppose, to the community. Do you want to have this service available? And because we're approaching the point where, as a council, we've got to make a decision. Do we allow people to take their four-wheel drives on Lily's Beach? Because what I'm hearing is ratepayers will have to foot the bill, substantial costs to enforce compliance, or we can just shut it off and say, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And I think we're getting to that point because a lot of people out there are sick and tired of seeing the damage to the dunes, to the vegetation, turtle nesting sites, etc., the rubbish. I've been down there myself. There's rubbish everywhere from people that don't do the right thing. This is not the way we should look after our environment. And I know that there's a lot of people that do the right thing, but the people that aren't are going to ruin it potentially for everyone else. So thank you anyway.
I kind of want to agree with you and disagree at the same time, so I might just let it go. Like, I don't want to personally restrict access, but I hear your points. And I also don't think that bringing it back in-house for the permits is the right thing. Maybe it's a case of, I'll come to Councillor Henson in a second, you have to, have you read these terms and conditions? Everyone goes down the bottom and ticks yes, and no one reads them, I get that. But if maybe it was like a your learner's permit or something, you have to say, answer a question, or it's 1, 2, 3, so you just can't tick one and then you've actually got to read the question and know the answer. Because probably some of those younger ones particularly don't know necessarily they're doing the wrong thing. They probably should. You'd have to be pretty silly not to know, but, 18, 19-year-old boys generally, not always. I know I've got 2 of them. So, look, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do with that, but Councillor Goodluck makes some good points, but I certainly don't want to see restrictions, so I'd rather see what we can do to make sure we don't have to restrict access. Councillor Henson.
Yes, I agree with you, Mayor. I think the report says that, and if we go through the investment decision framework on it, I think we can get a good decision out of it. And my point is to try and keep allowing access to Lily's Beach, legally, of course. Yeah. So I'm not looking forward to the day where we ever close something like that for the people, but yeah.
Councillor Muscat.
I have to agree, and I don't like to see places like these close to the public, but sometimes we have to do things because we have to send a message that we either enjoy it now and not care about it now, or we won't have it later on. So this is not just about our immediate need, it's about the future and the availability of this area for everybody. So I agree with the comments, and I really look forward to see what it is, because I like to be able to speak to the community and explain to them, we can do this or we can do that. Are you happy to pay this amount of money, or you are happy to maybe have restricted access, not 12 months of the year access. Maybe there might be some other solutions that we can come up with, and then see how we go and keep reviewing it, because sometimes people learn by having to have restrictions on, and it's unfortunate that we all have to suffer that too. But we all have to work together to make sure that our environment is respected, and the lifelong areas, these areas are here and continue to be what they are for a long time.
Councillor, Councillor Goodluck.
I just and I'd hate to see it close as well, Mr. Mayor, but we've got people we've been aware of this issue for a long time. And I don't want to take away from all the fantastic work that's in this report. I'm just focusing on this one point. We've got identified environmental issues here with vegetation, turtle nesting sites. We know that 60% of people who drive on the beach don't even have the permits, and we've got $48,000 applied. We've got options here presented in this report, and we've chosen maintain the status quo. So if council is serious about addressing this issue, I think we've probably missed an opportunity to do so here, and perhaps that's a discussion for another day, but because this is the problem that I keep getting from people in the community that want us to do something, and we've got a report that says, and we've said, well, we'll do a little bit, but we don't want to close off access, we don't want to do all this other stuff, we're not really going to put a substantial budget item to actually do something and enforce compliance. So that's something that we need to discuss if we're serious about addressing this issue, getting the education, getting the compliance, and making sure that we protect this area, if we don't want to restrict access.
We can allocate a budget allocation. I know it would have to go through, where's Mark? There he is, through Mark's team, but...
we would also need to understand what we want to do. So if it is like full-time local laws, that there are other areas in the region that have been crying out for increased enforcement, not least for dogs down in Agnes. So it does come with it's about understanding what we want to do, and that's what we're talking about using the IDF. It's not necessarily to delay a decision, it's to understand what we actually want to do and what the options are available to us, and then we'll come back to you in terms of what that budget might be. But the initial action we can take is helping QPS to undertake enforcement, and that's putting the signage up, and that's minimal cost. We've already got some already in design, and it's about $1,500 to get that done.
Is there a timeline on the IDF in there? When would this come back through the IDF? Investment decision framework for those listening online?
So our intention is that once this is through, in the next few weeks, we will commence IDF processes and put the different management options, all of them will start through that process.
And we're very keen to get your input into that as we look at some of those options to consider what some of the implications
I'm pleased you raised that point as the mover of the motion, because at the end of the day, we're going to progress on it, what the actions are, but we need to also make sure there's comprehensive community engagement on this, and not just our decision-making around this table. We'll make the final decision at the end of the day, but we need to go to the people to find out.
Councillor O'Grady.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and whether we can contact the permit holders as well to get their engagement, and yeah, I think that's a really good way to go. Thanks.
No, you don't need to declare that you got a permit, Councillor Churchill. I think we all have. Any further questions or comments, councillors? I have a mover in Councillor Churchill, second in Councillor Branthwaite. Put the motion. All in favour? The motion is carried in. Thank you. And thank you, Ali. The next item on the agenda is G3.3, which is flying fox roost management. Oh, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Can't we just give it to the state to manage? Glenn, here's yours.
That'd be good. So the purpose of this report is, to ask you to adopt an updated statement of management intent, and at the same time repeal the current Miriam Vale Flying Fox Management Plan in favour of the regional Flying Fox Management Plan, which is included in your attachments, which includes management options for all roosts on council-controlled land, as well as process for responding to changes in those roost locations. We have Ali here, and also Emily is with us as well, who's the chief flying fox specialist that we have on staff.
I got in trouble last time I commented on the flying foxes, so I'll let it go. I understand the priority of their protected species, but people who live near them need to be first and foremost. And what happened in Miriam Vale should not be allowed to happen again. Anyway, that's my last comment on that. Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. Yeah, no, I agree with you what happened down in Miriam Vale, but I think it was a good outcome at the end of the day, what happened. So it took a fair while to get through it. My question appropriately is that, and I support the officer's recommendation, is that you indicated in your report, in the body of your report, that there may be further opportunities coming forward from state government funding. So I'd like to just get an understanding of what that part is, because if we do nothing, then we're not probably going to be eligible for state government funding. But I'd also like to know if there's federal government funding, because my understanding, and maybe the same understanding from others, there seems to be an inconsistency across the nation in relation to this management and control of flying foxes. And where does our flying fox management plan, now that we've actually taken it from Miriam Vale to a whole of region, how does that sit with our other local governments that are our neighbours, Bundaberg, Banana, Rockhampton, Livingston, in relation to their management of flying foxes? Or are we just moving the problem around the region?
So I guess the first thing was around having, to be eligible for funding, we need to have a regional flying fox management plan. So the idea was to incorporate the specific Miriam Vale one into the regional one, I guess acknowledging that we do have roosts across our region. So we have obviously in the regional plan looked at a number of management actions and options, and some of those would be subject to funding. So because they're in the plan, once this goes through, we'll be eligible to apply for the funding. So that will obviously help us progress some of those management options. In terms of, I guess, federal funding, we're only at the moment aware of the state funding that's available. There's 2 more rounds and that's been running for a number of years. We're not sure what comes after the next 2 rounds, but we'll actively watch that space. And in terms of our, I guess, neighbouring councils, it is pretty consistent for a lot of the councils to have regional plans, and we did utilise and access a number of those plans to look at what other councils are doing and what their management options are and how they risk assess what they do with different roofs when you're looking at the person and flying fox conflict that occurs. So we are actively looking at it and trying to understand how we will work through how we manage the different roofs across the region and where we can tap into that funding options to help manage those roofs.
Yeah, thank you for that. Is it a CQ rock issue? Is it a CQ rock issue from a management of flying foxes? Because we do know that what happened out west, all of a sudden the roost moved and then it's moved into another local government area and then obviously becomes, so you move the problem from one local government area and you give the problem to the other local government area.
And that's why I guess we have the management and risk assessment process, and there is the standards that we have to work under as a local government. We need to be aware and make notification to neighbouring councils if we are going to do any activities that might disperse them, because we could be moving the problem, but we actually don't know where they're going, and quite often they probably just move around our region anyway. So it is managing that balance around if we do something, where might they go and how do we risk assess that and make sure we're doing the right action at that moment.
I think as well another differentiator between us and other councils, and some councils which have received quite a lot of publicity for their dispersal actions, is the size of the roofs involved and the scale of the disruption and damage. So I think I remember some of there was some comparatives between what we had and.
Yeah, so I think north of Burnett Shire at one point had over 1 million flying fox in one of their roofs. It was situated out of town, so I think some of our roofs have had numbers up to maybe 15,000. So the number that we're looking at is very different.
Yeah, I understand it's sensitive. In other parts of the world, they're a delicacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Cameron, then Councillor Muscat, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Are we working with the Ports Corporation with their flying flocks plan? Because Spenica Park and the Parklands was heavily infected, absolutely decimated there at one point.
So we did, when they were establishing their flying fox management plan, they did invite us to participate and I guess engage with us on theirs. But in terms of our regional flying fox management plans and our statement of management intent that is private property, so it would be up to them to undertake their own management activities themselves.
You don't think there's value in working with them on that? Because these little fellas get around fairly quickly.
Yeah, I guess that's that risk-based approach and around how, so if they are going to do any activities, they do need to do notification and get their permits through Department of Environment and Science as well. And obviously we are in communication with them on those topics, because if they were to do some kind of dispersal activity, based on where they are, we don't know where they would go in the CBD area or external to that. So, but from our council's risk perspective, if we collaborate on them and they go somewhere and we've participated in that activity, that does come back to reputational risk and whatnot to us as well.
Well, I don't know what they did to get rid of the bats, but they're gone. So.
They're not gone from the region, Councillor.
No, they're not, but Spenica Park.
There's a fair horde of them at the waste transfer station, Gladstone Waste Transfer Station, around that area.
Yeah.
Councillor Muscat.
Thank you. I actually wanted to say thank you again to your team, Emily, Fox Chief Officer. I find the information in the management plan quite balanced. It is, I don't like to, I mean, the flying foxes are a creature of our world, and I know we might have different opinions, but they do play a very important part of our environmental, in our ecosystem. So these I think what you've done here is strike a great balance between their importance and comfort. At the end of the day, we need to start seeing things in a more holistic way. It's not, again, not short term, but long term and bigger picture. So these are valuable animals that play a part in our lives. So thank you, and I'll be more than happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Hanson, can I get a seconder for that, please?
That's what I was going to do. I was going to move, Mr Mayor, so
Okay.
I'm happy to second.
Okay. Move Councillor Muscat, second Councillor Hanson. Further questions? I have a whole bunch, but anyway. Congratulations on the report with the most acronyms I've possibly ever read since being on the airport board many years ago. I had to keep going back to remember what all these acronyms are, the UFFMAs and the SOMIs, and thank you very much. Yeah, okay. Well, look, hopefully this can help manage them. I just don't want to see a situation again where people's homes are completely surrounded and they can't get to their clothesline. I get 100% they're a very important part of the ecosystem and need to be protected. But so do humans. So we just need to do what we can to protect the people whose homes are completely sometimes surrounded by them. Anyway, thank you. I have a mover and Councillor Muscat, second and Councillor Hanson. Put the motion. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Emily. Yes, no worries. I said, oh, okay. The next item on the agenda is G3.4, which is expenditure approval for Microsoft licensing. They might have a bit of monopoly here. General Manager of Finance, Governance and Risk. I'll hand over to Mark Holmes. Thank you, Mark.
For our Microsoft licensing through Data3, which has essentially been a long-time provider to council of those. So we essentially access that licensing through Data3 as essentially a vendor who collate that demand across the region and across the Queensland, and we then access their arrangements. So we're actually at the top level within Data3, so this is about endorsing that expenditure for the next 3 years.
Literally no options, councillors.
Yeah.
Thank you, Microsoft. Good on you, Bill. Mover, please. Move Councillor Branthwaite, second Councillor O'Grady. I'm assuming there's no comments or questions. Put the motion. No? All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is G3.5, which is sole supply for Mets. Back to you, Mark. Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Mayor. I do have project manager for the Gladstone Aquatic Centre project, Mr. Van Tonder, online to answer any questions should you have them for the next two reports. This report is seeking your approval to acknowledge that there is essentially only one supplier reasonably available to us for the supply of cement pool tiles for Gladstone Pool. So you'll recall that we've installed Mets pool tiles in the 25-metre pool. We're looking at trying to make sure we've got a consistent product throughout that centre as we go through the retiling for the 50-metre pool. We're seeking to continue with that product for Mets, hence the recommendation before you.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? You happy? Move Councillor O'Grady, second Councillor Churchill. Question from Councillor Branthwaite, yes?
It wasn't actually a question. It was quite beneficial that we went on a tour last week and actually heard from PK and found out the reasons why this is the best product and the only product that can be used. So it's a lot of confidence that you can actually put this motion through. We give insights like that. You know, we look from the outside looking in and we think, well, why the heck are they doing that? But when you find out the nitty-gritty of what he was talking about, there is only one option, and this is the option. So I would be supporting the option.
Thanks. BM.
BM.
I'm thinking, who's PK?
I couldn't remember, it was a P something. It's BM, BK, or...
Thank you. Yeah, BM online. Thank you. So no other questions, councillors? Excellent. Makes sense. Move it, Councillor O'Grady, second Councillor Churchill. All in favour? Motion's carried. Continuing on at the Aquatic Centre, G3.6 is the Altos Pacific Sole Supply.
Councillors, you'll recall back in March that you made a recommendation to go with Ultra Pacific Sole Supplier as a recommendation to essentially install a heating system for what was essentially the providing that utility and that service for the 50-metre pool as we did the upgrades for the 25-metre pool. We're now reversing that and now looking at seeking your endorsement for Ultra Pacific to make the alterations to the water heating system to essentially heat back the 25-metre pool.
Thank you, Mark. Questions, councillors, or a mover, please? Move, Councillor Hanson. Seconder, Councillor Cameron. No questions? Put the motion. All in favour. It's carried. Thank you. Okay, Mark. Next one is G3.7, which is a monthly financial report for the period ending the 31st of August 2022. Over to you.
Councillors, this is your monthly financial statements for the period ending the 31st of August 2022. So we're essentially just under 17% of the way through the financial year from a pro rata perspective. You'll see that from an overall recurrent revenue perspective, we are a little bit behind that pro rata at this point, so at 13.77 as compared to that. And we've detailed some of those variances through there. So there's some of our financial assistance grants and our income tax equivalents and the like that come through as lump sum payments, and we expect to receive those later on in the year. We are whilst it's good on one hand, bad on one hand with respect to some of the movements in interest rates, there is a little bit of positive in terms of we're actually getting a little bit more return on our investments. So you'll note there that our interest revenue is starting to pick up a little bit as we start to get some better returns on our money that we've got in investments. So we've previously been way down in that space, and we're now looking at getting returns that are closer to 3%, which is great. With respect to our expenditure, still in line with budget, so just under pro rata there at 16.5% as opposed to that 17% from a pro rata perspective. So really, essentially, in line with expectations at this point of the year. With respect to our capital, trending along there, so we've got 4.9 million actually spent and if you look at our commitments, we've essentially got a expenditure there around about 15.1. We do are looking through a reforecasting process there to make sure that we do have our essentially projects all accounted for there. The forecast is around about 51.4 at the moment, so in line with that, but I am expecting to see some movements in that in the coming months as we start to work through some of those projects, particularly some of the funded projects.
Movements up or down?
I'd expect it initially up, but then I'd actually expect to see it come back down. So as we go through our budget process, generally there'll be some where we've underestimated, I guess, some of the carryover works.
Okay.
I expect to see them to come in.
Yeah.
But given our current, as we've talked about many times around our constraints around the capital works at the moment, and sometimes the ability
It's quite
to
difficult,
get stuff,
isn't it?
I'd actually see it's come back into line.
Yeah.
So the team, that it is a balancing act.
Yeah.
So they are going to work through that reforecasting piece. But I expect you'll initially see a movement upwards, but then essentially trend back towards budget
All right.
as the
Thanks,
year
Mark.
progresses. And you'll also note there, moving on to our outstanding rates, that we essentially have achieved a result that we haven't achieved for quite some time. So as we sit here at the end of August, our outstanding rates was at 2.5%. So that's the lowest it's been for quite some time, which is really good to see as we go through our current rating period. We'll revert. Like I say, there'll be one more month of reporting against the previous budget, previous rate levy, and then we'll essentially revert at the end of October to the reporting on the current financial year.
Fantastic.
But happy to take any questions with respect to the report.
Councillor Churchill.
Page 22 was just a reference to our current vacancy rate, and perhaps a question through you to our General Manager of People and Performance, but you're indicating 7.5% is our budget factored on average. Currently, the average vacancy rate for the year is 8.4, so I'd just like to know what the vacancy rate is as of today, and how do we equate that 8.4% over a year? Is that the preceding 12 months to get that average of 8.4?
So the 7.5%, that's what we've budgeted on. That's essentially looking at that from a whole, essentially averaging it out over the year. I'll defer to Tinas, who may be able to answer some of the questions around what our current rate is, but 8.4 was the result, the result at the end of August. So if it has moved in the last 3 weeks, Tinas may have some updates with respect to that.
Well, I suppose the intent of my question is more determining whether it's going up or whether it's going down or whether it's just,
Tinas,
up and down.
Yes, I can answer on that one. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Are we able to see you?
Yes, you are. I can just put on my camera. Can you see me?
No. No.
So
Definitely.
let's just put the camera off. I don't know what's happening there.
That's okay.
Anyway.
Councillors, the vacancy rate or the turnover rate is still tracking around 15% at the moment. We've seen a slight decrease coming down, so the trend, it seems like we've reached the peak. The peak was around 16.2%. It is tracking downwards at the moment, so hopefully we start to see some settling in that space. But we still have significant challenges based on a more Australia-wide global scenario around shortages of skills and longer times to fill positions. We've done a recent exercise to compare ourselves with the rest of Queensland, and we are doing better than the resource areas where local governments are in the resource sectors. As it relates to coastal, we are having a higher turnover than other coastal regions, but we're basically on par with central Queensland at the moment. So it's not, our turnover rate is not something that is out of context with the rest of what's happening in Queensland and broad Australia and globally at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it's relevant to my Developing Northern Australia report later on the agenda. I think it's the final agenda item. But, you know, if it's 15.2% today, previous reports was 12, the previous was 10, and I was trying to work out how we got an average vacancy rate of 8.4%. So obviously, within, I suppose, the last 9 months or 12 months, it has been quite low. Yeah, for it to get that 8.4. So, and as you say, we're not the only ones suffering from it. But anyway, 15.2, that's alarming. Thank you.
If I may, Mr Mayor, can I just clarify, Tina, there's two different figures there. There's annual turnover rate, and there's vacancy rate, which are two different figures. So we just need to make sure we're comparing
That's right. So
the same ones. Yeah.
So was that the actual vacancy rate at the moment?
It's the vacancy rate, yes, as opposed to the turnover rate. So that's the rolling. Yeah, Titus, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the rolling 12-month turnover rate is at that 15% currently.
Yes.
Yes.
You're absolutely right, Lisa. The turnover rate impacts the vacancy rate, but the vacancy rate is more of a financial measure in terms of if we look at the unavailability as a result of vacancies, and that average, and it all depends on lead time to fill positions, etc., etc. So that's more of a financial measure, and that's the one that comes out of finance.
Yeah, thank you. I think that clarifies it now, but it's probably going to be an ongoing question, you know, on a monthly basis as trends are changing out there in the marketplace.
Thank you. Councillor Churchill, any further questions for Mark? Yeah? I don't have a mover yet, so Councillor Goodluck has a question. No, you're moving. Okay, well, I'll get Councillor Goodluck to move and you can second. Thank you. Either or. Over to you, Rach. So moved. I'm going to go Councillor Goodluck, seconded Councillor Churchill. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is, thank you, Mark, is the rescheduling of the October General Council meeting. Obviously, councillors, with Councillor Trevor as an apology and a number of councillors at the local government annual conference, it's appropriate we reschedule that council meeting. I'll hand over to the CEO.
I don't know if I have anything else to add, Mr Mayor. Happy to answer any questions.
No, we're just rescheduling it to the following week. Move, Councillor.
Happy to move, Mr Mayor.
Hanson, seconded Councillor O'Grady. All in favour? It's carried. Thank you. We have no deputations this morning, but we do have councillor reports, and the first councillor report is GS1, and I'll hand over to Councillor Muscat for welcoming cities. Thank you.
Oops, thank you. Hopefully you've been able to read the report. I don't want to read it to you again, but I will ask that anyone watching takes the time to read it. There is something that I would like to recommend, which is that we continue the membership with Welcoming Cities Australia, which I think we commenced in 2019. And to go on to the next step of being a welcoming city as per the National Welcoming City Standard, I'm asking you to adopt a public welcoming statement, which is written here, that says Gladstone Regional Council is actively aligning with best practice multiculturalism as identified in the National Welcoming City Standard declares itself a welcoming community. We embrace diversity, foster social cohesion, and are focused on building economic success. Council endeavours to use a whole-of-community approach to not only embrace diversity, but also harness its strength and identity opportunities to enhance our multicultural focus. As a council, we will benchmark cultural diversity and inclusion policies and practices across the organisation and continue to identify how further efforts can be directed. I believe Kylie will have a couple of things to show, and I wanted to also thank Kylie and her team for helping put this together. And there's also some media and videos that have been prepared, and she is going to show you a few things.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Kylie.
Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the United States. Earlier this year, the Gladstone Regional Council was invited to represent Australia at the Welcoming Interactive Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the United States of America. A few years ago, in 2019, I believe, we decided as a council to join Welcoming Australia. Welcoming Australia, it's an organisation that operates to support local councils to become more welcoming, and they have a framework that it's been designed to guide councils on best practice to become as welcoming as possible and as cohesive as possible, supporting inclusivity in our community.
So Welcoming Interactive is Welcoming America's symposium that they hold annually, and they bring welcoming cities from across America together to share their ideas around inclusion and welcoming strategies. Gladstone was chosen as the first Australian council to participate in the Rural Welcoming Exchange. So we partnered with Gunnison County in Colorado, really small little county, to talk about our welcoming strategies from a rural perspective and the differences between cities and rural communities.
I think we should be really proud that within our community we have such great organisations that already exist to promote multiculturalism, and the fact that Council is wanting to partner with these groups and really demonstrate on a worldwide scale just how much we care about multiculturalism and inclusion and how important it is to our community is something that we should be really proud of.
Gladstone Regional Council has been very much proactive in this space for a long time now. So when I first moved to Gladstone in 2007, we had already a very strong team that looked at strategies to make this region more welcoming and more inclusive of people from all backgrounds and cultures. So I felt very welcome, and that's the work that we want to continue to do. So to go from strength to strength, building on the things that the council has already been doing for a long time.
But I think probably one of the most enlightening moments so far, it was we went to a little Salvadorian restaurant in Charlotte. Everything was in Spanish. The waitress spoke Spanish, and everybody that I was with, as wonderful and as welcoming as they were, they all spoke fluent Spanish. So I was the only one that spoke little Spanish. I can say hola, that's, hello, but that's about it. So I felt completely out of my depth. I felt I didn't know how to order. I didn't know what I was eating. I didn't know what people were saying. And even though I felt so comfortable in the presence of everybody there, I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to do just the most basic things, how to order a meal, and it felt really confronting. So I guess from that experience, I can absolutely understand how, even with the best intentions that we have around connecting communities and connecting people from different backgrounds, there are still those challenges when you don't speak the same language that everybody else is speaking so fluently, and how uncomfortable that can make people feel. So I think really when we're planning some of those events around connecting our communities, we need to be really conscious about how they're feeling if they're not speaking fluent English. So it was a really defining moment for me.
It is very humbling to know that Gladstone was picked as a council to be representative of regional and remote areas in Australia. I think our community should be very proud of the work that we have done, because it's not just what we do as council, it's that everybody is part of that system of welcoming and inclusivity. Council can do a lot of things, but if people aren't part of it, this won't work. And the reason why it has worked so well is because our community understands the value of diversity, because our community knows that we are better if we involve everyone.
Wow, well done. Did you learn any more Spanish, Carly?
I'm happy to give you.
Okay. Do you want to talk further to the report, Councillor Muscat?
I can talk about this for a long time if you want to, but yeah, and maybe just one of the things that supports all the work that council has been doing for a long time, not just since I'm here, and that was my intention in recognising the work that it's been done for a long time. So, and I guess me sitting here is kind of a consequence of all that work. So I just want to make sure that I honour everyone that came before me and continue to do more, because as I said before, everybody benefits. It's not just us or you, or we live in a democracy which we love, and if we are better represented, we will have better outcomes. So I love you to support the recommendation and adopt this public welcoming statement to be put in our website and the places that we go, and continue the work on the National Welcoming City Standard, which Kylie's team has been supporting, and I thank them very much for it. And we had a great time in the US. We also learned that as a little country, I mean, not in size, but the US has about 50 million people that were born in another country. We have 25 million people in total. So for a small country, a small population, not in size, but in population, we do a lot more than many others. So we were very proud to actually come to realise a lot of that. We were able to help others and yeah, learn a lot from how they do things there and how we do things here. So one of my highlights anyway was to show Kylie how it feels to not be in a place where she has been all her life, and how it feels. So yeah, and the fact that I can talk about it all the time, but you can't never understand it until you feel it. So when you are welcome, it makes a lot of difference, not just to yourself, but everybody around you and your family and everyone that you support. So I'm really happy that I'm proud to be a councillor that can actually help this council and all of us move in this direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muscat. Would you like to move your recommendation there?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Goodluck. Any questions for Councillor Muscat or further comments? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the next council report, G5.2, Developing Northern Australia. Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mayor Matt and fellow councillors. Thank you first and foremost for the opportunity to attend the Developing Northern Australia conference, and maybe in opening up, and you would have read the report, it's quite evident and it's quite obvious that our region going forward is facing the same challenges and the opportunities that other regions in perhaps outside of the major cities are facing when it comes to health services, skills attraction, and I'd also go to say that the crisis that's looming is affordable, available, accessible accommodation. So rather than read through the whole report, there's a map here, if I could present it to you, which is just so that those people who don't know Gladstone region, I'll present that to you, Matt, and pass around the agenda, which is attached anyway to the agenda item. Probably at this stage there was 440 attendees. It's the largest held to date of the 8 conferences. There was obviously a lot of talk about the pathways for developing Northern Australia, because we sit in the bottom, I suppose, eastern corner of the developing Northern Australia with Queensland, Northern Territory and Western Australia. And their focus now is not just about economic, even though that has been part of the main format for the original Developing Northern Australia. It's quite evident that environment and a lot of the social factors are now becoming more prominent in those, not only in the presentations but in the discussions. There was a strong focus on the importance of the human services sector and the unique difficulties that are being confronted by Northern Australia in building the region's livability and the economy. There was also a stronger focus now on supporting the economic aspirations of the traditional owners in Northern Australia, and there were some very, I would say, very empowering and emotional cases that are now proven and being put to the test. I know we have our turtle tank here. I think they have the crocodile tank up there in a number of those economic opportunities. The new Minister for Resources in Northern Australia, the Honourable Madeleine King MP, opened the conference and committed the new Australian government to picking up the Developing Northern Australia agenda. Also, the Northern Australia Ministerial Forum, including the Indigenous Reference Group, was reinstated. I think that's important as well. Senator Murray Watt, Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry and Emergency Management, followed up, and he made a commitment to sustainable agriculture in the north through a focus on water and food security. Our own member for Gladstone, the Honourable Glenn Butcher, Minister for Regional Development and Manufacturing, was part of a forum delivering with his counterparts from Western Australia and Northern Territory to discuss the common regional issues of enabling infrastructure to support regional and remote communities. And I've put this in the report here, and I'd like to acknowledge Gary Scanlon, our economic development specialist. He's probably go so far as to say he's the godfather of understanding what economic development is occurring in developing Northern Australia, but he's also at the same time well connected, because as some of you would know, Gary's past career was involved in a lot of the areas of Mackay Whitsundays and throughout Northern Territory. But like the Gladstone region, most regions across Northern Australia are dealing with the change in the energy mix, and there is a huge number of growing renewable energy projects, far too many to list here at this stage, but it seems to be quite evident that the learnings that we got from this conference, and I'm sure Gary will be instrumental in doing that, is that it's consistent with the discussions that are occurring right now for our Gladstone Region Transition Group in determining appropriately what are we going to look like in Gladstone Region in the next 5, 10 and 20 years. Just a couple of final points here. when we start to talk about the renewable development, the national problem is skills and the labour shortage. You know, so perhaps to suggest that for those who were able to breed, we haven't been able to produce enough of our own locally or within the region or nationally perhaps. So it seems quite evident that, and we've seen this recently, I think, with the Australian government with the Jobs Summit. So there was a number of outcomes that poured out of this Developing Northern Australia Conference, and one of the pathways and strategies that's still being considered for the Gladstone region is trying to find that common theme of what skills will be required in the future and where will they come from and how will they be developed when we start to talk about the training and development education of our own local young people and seniors as well. So finally, there is a projected $92 billion worth of projects across Northern Australia within excess of 33,000 direct jobs. So we need more people, there's no doubt about that, and skills transition. And I suppose the final two comments here is that there was a recent study on a workforce mobility by Central Queensland University, and it highlighted that there is a poor understanding of the regions across Northern Australia and the misconception of opportunities that will allow for their sustainability and progress into the region. So they've got to, if they talk about Job Summit, we need to be talking about how do we get people out of the cities and get them to come into the regions. And I know that that's been a topic probably not only for the past few years, for decades. And so it's not only just about getting the people here, we need to have the infrastructure and the services to support them. A continuing theme from last year and the previous year is the changing economy in Northern Australia, is the innovation and the emergence of renewable energy in the agri-food, manufacturing, tourism and lifestyle sector. So my final comment is the Developing Northern Australia Conference continues to be a key driver for focus on where we sit in Northern Australia. It is a well-respected and it's well-attended, especially across the political spectrum. So it's not only just what you do at the conference, it's what you do outside with the value of the networking and the advocacy. So I'd like to ask if you could endorse my report and Gary's report as well. And if there's any questions, I'd be prepared to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Question, the Cooperative Research Centre for Developing Northern Australia, do you think there's worth Council considering, or the ROC considering, or someone being a member of that? I know Rockhampton Regional Council is a member, Townsville Enterprise is a member, almost every RDA except Fitzroy is a member, seems to be Central Highlands Development Corporation is a member.
Look, I'd endorse that, Mayor Matt. I think if you were to place that on the CQ ROC agenda.
Do you think it should be the ROC or should it be Council? Rocky Regional Council is a member.
I think it's probably a CQ ROC agenda item because, from my perspective, is that when we talk about economic development, we talk about social infrastructure and we talk about the environment, they know no boundaries. And I don't think they should be bound by local government boundaries when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. And as far as agribusiness is concerned, when we talk about agribusiness going forward and the beef industry and the export market, we need to understand the value of roads and the infrastructure because it's all connected within Central Queensland. So, and getting also our fellow local governments to understand where Central Queensland fits on the Developing Northern Australia Conference as well, because for fear that we end up having a Southern Australia, developing Southern Australia or developing Central Australia, but as it stands at the moment, I think from the Australian government's perspective, they've made a commitment, as the report indicates, to the Developing Northern Australia agenda, and we need to be part of it. So I would suggest CQ ROC is probably a discussion point.
And obviously the RDA, because you've got RDA, Mackay, Isaac Whitsunday, Northern Territory, Kimberley, Townsville, North and West, Australian Tropical North, but not Fitzroy. And yet you've got Rocky Regional Council and Central Highlands as members, so...
Yeah, good pick up.
Do I need a recommendation to add that to that?
Well, good pick up, Mayor Matt, because the RDA Central, the chair, Grant Cassidy, and others were at that conference as well.
Attended, but not members, so we need to, I'll get that on the ROC agenda, and maybe we'll talk to either the ROC or the RDA about making sure that Central Queensland is represented.
Yeah,
Obviously,
totally agree.
Fitzroy Basins Association, there's a member, so there's synergies there for CQ, but.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I did distribute one particular model to fellow councillors that related to the regeneration of the reef. And there is a site quite innovative and entrepreneurial business ventures in Darwin, Cairns and Bundaberg. So there could be some level of significance for Central Queensland to see how we can be involved in that aspect of the regeneration of the reef. That's effectively on-land creation of the reef polyps, and as they grow, they transition and take them out into the reef as part of its renewal.
All right, thank you, Councillor Churchill. Do you want to move that your report be received, which is the
Oh,
recommendation?
yeah, no, I'd be quite happy to, if no other questions.
Yep. Any other questions, councillors? No. Moved, Councillor Churchill. Seconded, Councillor Cameron. Thank you. All in favour? No, I would have done it. All in favour, carried. There's no urgent business and there's no notices of motion, no confidential items. I declare the meeting closed at 10:21 a.m. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers.